Good morning and Shavua Tov. The statistics are astonishing. In Israel, on Friday, they closed the COVID-19 unit at Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Yerushalayim because they don't have any more COVID-19 patients. The statistics in Israel are that 229 people succumbed tragically to the illness of COVID-19, the disease, the virus. And that's in a population of 9.2 million citizens, which means that for every million citizens in Israel, approximately 25 people died from the coronavirus. If you look at the United States, we have a population of 325 million people, and as of today, over 60,000 people have succumbed to this disease, this virus, which means that approximately for every million citizens, 185 people died, as opposed to in Israel, where only 25 people died per million. And the question is why? Obviously, Israel has great hospitals, great doctors, great nurses, great scientists, but so does the United States. So how do we explain this discrepancy, this variance between 25 per million in Israel and 185 per million in the United States? And I'm sure that there'll be many studies to try to figure it out. And I'm surely no expert and I don't have the answer, but I do want to learn from Israel immediately. And I think, as you know, we're always accustomed to helping Israel. This is a situation where Israel needs to teach us. What are they doing that we're not doing? But perhaps there's a general idea that we could apply here. You know, we're now in the days of the Sfirat Omer. You would expect the days of Sfirat Omer to be happy days, because after all, we're counting towards the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. When the Jews left Egypt, they counted 49 days to get the Torah. Today's the 24th day. But yet they're sad days, at least up until Lag BaOmer. Why are they sad days? Because the Talmud tells us that in the times of the great sage Rabbi Akiva, 24,000 students, with the exception of 5, died during these 33 days, and therefore they became a period of mourning. How did they die? Says the Talmud, they died from a pandemic, some kind of a disease, illness that was plaguing them, and with the exception of 5 students who survived, all of the 24,000 students, Rabbi Akiva died. So here we are going through a pandemic, and we remember a period when there was another pandemic that we still remember now, 1800 years later. However, from the 5 students that survived, one of them was the famous Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who actually his yahrzeit is also on Lag BaOmer, and as you know, not this year maybe, but typically, a million Jews go from all over Israel to his gravesite to pray and to celebrate his passing on Lag BaOmer, because he said the day of his passing should be a day of rejoicing, because according to Kabbalistic teachings, which he was one of the great revealers of the Kabbalistic tradition, the day of a person's death is when they're like a marriage, because the soul is reunited with God. So there's a story told of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who lived in the north. As you know, he's buried in Meron. That one time a couple came to him and they said, you know, we've been married 10 years and we haven't had children. We'd like to get divorced so we could maybe try with different spouses to have children. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, I'm happy to arrange a divorce for you, a get, but on one condition. What's the condition? He said to them, just like when you got married, you did it with a celebration. When you get divorced, you should do it with a celebration. You should say goodbye with a celebration. And therefore, you should have a party. And then the next day, come back to me and I'll arrange the divorce. They went ahead and they threw a party for their friends. And at the end of the party, the man had gotten completely drunk. And he said to his wife, you know, I love you so much. Unfortunately, we haven't had children. We want to try to have children. But before you go, since you're leaving my home tonight, tomorrow we're going to get divorced, you could look around the house and take anything you want with you. Take any treasure, any valued, beloved thing in this house, you can take it with you to your home. And he fell asleep drunk. When he fell asleep drunk, she told the servants to pick up his bed and carry him on his bed to her parents' home. The next morning, the Talmud says he wakes up, he looks around, he sees he's in his own in-law's house. He says to his wife, where am I? What am I doing here? And she said, well, you told me to take you here. He says, I told you to take me here? When did I tell you that? She says, when you said a lot of l'chaim, you got drunk, and you said to me, look around the house and take anything you want, the most beloved possession, treasure that you can find in this house. I looked around, and ein li chayfetz elibach. I have no desire except you. So I told my servants to bring you to my parents' home as I leave your home. They went back to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and they told him the story. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, let me pray for you to have a child. And Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai prayed, and sure enough, 9 months later they had a child. This is the story in the Talmud. And the question is, if Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was able to pray for them to have a child, why did he tell them in the first place to go get divorced and have a party? He could have just prayed for them in the first place to have a child. Why did he have to tell them to go home and have a party and then get divorced? And then the second time they come back, he blesses them with a child. And one of the beautiful answers is that Rabbi Akiva saw that after 10 years of marriage, this couple were taking each other for granted. Their love, their spark of intimacy, of connection had a little bit dwindled, had died out. Rabbi Akiva wanted to reignite the fire of passion of love in the couple, the love for one another. So he said to them, go home and have a party. And after they came back the second time and said that she said, the only thing I want is you, and their love was reignited, rekindled, he said, now that you have a greater love for each other, I can bless you with a child. And sure enough, they were blessed with a child, and they remained happily married. And the lesson of the story is that the greatest blessings in life come through love. As it says, when a husband and a wife live with love, God dwells amongst them. But not just a husband and a wife. In last week's parasha, yesterday, it said, love your neighbor as yourself, I am God. And rabbis say, when two people love each other, two Jews love each other, God says, I am the third party to that relationship. God dwells where there is love. And perhaps this is the secret of Israel's success. Israelis feel like one big family. And as a family member, you're willing to sacrifice for your family member more than for a stranger. And that feeling of connection that Israelis have, and we know Israel has been through many crises, and Israeli mentality is we're willing to go to the front lines. Every boy and girl at a young age goes to the front lines to defend their country, and they're ready to die for their country. They're ready to lay down their life. That feeling of bonding, of connection between every Jew in Israel that you only feel in Israel, that feeling of mishpacha brings greater blessings. And maybe one thing we could learn from a spiritual perspective, the doctors will learn the physical lessons, but from a spiritual perspective is that the more we love each other, the more we care for each other, the more we feel connected and responsible for one another, the lower our death rate will be. Because with love comes great spiritual blessings, but also with love and unity comes greater sacrifices for one another. Today we're seeing more and more people making sacrifice for one another, and we applaud all those that are on the front lines. But really every person has to do their part. And thank God we are, but we could always improve and always increase. And through this we will hopefully see the numbers continue to go down in a more dramatic way. You know, today's characteristic that we have to develop during the days of the Omer. So today is Teferes Shebenetzach. Teferes is mercy, compassion. Shebenetzach. Netzach is victory, endurance. So on the one hand, you have victory and endurance, which represents the individual. I won. I was victorious. On the other hand, you have compassion and kindness. How do the two go together? The lesson is very simple. My victory has to be connected to the victory of every other person. I can't just win alone. If I won alone, then that's not a victory. That's not a success. Success is when I bring everyone along in my success. Yes, I have endurance. I have victory. I have netzach. But on the same time, I have compassion. I don't just think about myself. I think about others. That's the mentality we have to cultivate. All for one, one for all. We're all in this together, which is really what we have been creating during this period, and hopefully it will only grow, and we'll take it with us even when we end this pandemic. And that's the message that Rabbi Akiva taught his students. After he lost 24,000 students, he said, you know why they died? They didn't have proper respect for one another. Shalom Nagul Kavod Zebazeh, they were judgmental of one another. A Judaism that allows you to be judgmental and critical of others, that you think you're holier than thou, I am victorious, I am special, but the other person I look down on, that is a illness, says Rabbi Akiva, that leads to a plague, that leads to the demise of his 24,000 students, tragically. But when he had his 5 students that remained, he rebuilt Judaism with the message of V'yahavta l'recha kamoch. He said, love your fellows yourself. This is the most important principle in the Torah, he said, because the principle of loving each other leads to the greatest blessings. God wants us to love each other because Judaism and Torah is meant to bring peace and unity in the world. A Judaism that doesn't bring us closer to each other is not a real Judaism. The greatest, holiest rabbis were the greatest lovers of Israel. The fact that they persevered and they were successful in becoming such great giants didn't make them look down with disdain on other Jews. On the contrary, it made them more compassionate, more loving. Because the barometer of Torah is how much you love another person. The students of Rabbi Akiva were judgmental of one another, critical of one another. They had disdain for one another. They didn't have proper respect for each other. And therefore the Talmud says 24,000 students died. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, one of those 5 students who survived, taught this couple and teaches every person that the more we love each other, the more blessings we will bring into our lives. Israeli society is a blessed society. The Torah says the eyes of God is upon the land of Israel. And part of the secret of the blessings of Israel is the feeling of unity, of oneness within the community. I'll conclude with the following true story. Once at a Paralympic, a Special Olympics for special needs individuals, people who have handicaps, there were a bunch of children running in a race, and the gun was shot, and the children started to run in the Special Olympics. And as they started to run, one little girl, a young girl, 12 years old, she fell and she stumbled onto the ground. And the audience was filled, the stadium, with onlookers and participants and cheering them on in the race. And suddenly, when the other children saw that this girl had fallen, all these special needs kids stopped in their track, turned around, lifted up the little girl, brushed her off, and then they all locked arms and they ran the race together, arm in arm. And the entire stadium stood up on their feet and were applauding thunderously as they crossed the finish line on the other end. Now I ask you, in a real Olympics, if one of the runners falls, stumbles, what happens? The other runners are overjoyed. Now I can get ahead. I could win. It boosts my odds of winning. But in this Special Olympics, yes, it was Netzach. We're in a competition. We want to win. But it's Netzach Shebe Teferes. There's mercy and compassion. The child fell. They all stopped, returned, lifted her up, and walked arm in arm with her to the finish line. And everyone applauded that because we all realized deep and down that they're not the special needs. We're the special needs if we only think about ourselves and our own winning. But they who understood that more important than winning is thinking about one another and even sacrificing for one another, they're the ones who have a lot to teach us. That's the lesson of today, Teferes Sheba Netzach, the 24th day of the Sfirat Omer. That's the lesson that we have to carry with us from the students of Rabbi Akiva. Yes, we all want to be winners in life. We all want to be successful. We all want to be victorious. But at the same time, we have to realize that we should never do it alone. We should bring everyone along and think about each other. And when we do that together, when we increase our love and unity, God increases our blessings for all of us, and we all rise and we all gain together. Have a wonderful day.